I have always been a sucker for a great space movie. And I don't just mean the fun, laser gun blockbuster kind. I mean the ones that actually mess with your head. The ones that use outer space as an excuse to ask questions about what it means to be human. Those are the ones I genuinely love. And those are the ones we're talking about today. So in this video, I'm recommending 10 space movies that I think genuinely deliver, whether you're in the mood for something that's gonna make you think, something that's gonna make you laugh, or something that's gonna make you stare at a blank wall for 20 minutes after it ends. A mix of all of the above, really. And all the streaming links for every single film on this list are pinned in the first comment below, so you can find them easily. Let's get into it. Starting things off, all the way at the bottom of this list, we've got what I would genuinely call one of the most challenging films I've ever recommended on this channel. And I mean that as a compliment. Solaris, the 1972 Andrei Tarkovsky version, is not a movie for everybody. I want to be upfront about that right now. This is a slow movie, deliberately, almost aggressively slow. It's a Russian sci-fi film about a psychologist sent to a space station orbiting a mysterious living planet. And when he gets there, the planet starts pulling memories and grief and guilt directly out of his subconscious and materializing them in front of him. That's the premise. And Tarkovsky takes that premise and uses it to make a film that has almost nothing to do with space exploration and everything to do with what we carry around inside ourselves. If you go in expecting anything like a conventional science fiction movie, you're gonna have a rough time. But if you go in understanding that this is essentially a philosophical poem disguised as a sci-fi film, and you give it the patience it asks for, it will linger with you in a way that very few movies do. I still think about certain images from this film years after watching it. It's a tough one to recommend casually, but for the right viewer, Solaris is genuinely extraordinary.
Stay tuned for scenes from next week's Galaxy Quest.
Never give up. Never surrender.
Now, from one extreme to the other, Galaxy Quest is a movie I will recommend to basically anyone, anytime, under any circumstances. It came out in 1999, and I think it's one of the most purely enjoyable films ever made about science fiction as a genre. The setup is that the washed-up cast of a canceled 1980s space opera TV show gets mistaken by real aliens for actual heroes, because those aliens picked up the broadcast and thought they were historical documentaries. Which is a ridiculous premise, and the movie knows it's ridiculous, and that self-awareness is exactly what makes it work so well.
You're gonna move to the right.
Would you sit your ass down? You wanna drive this thing?
What I love about Galaxy Quest is that it's a parody that genuinely loves what it's parodying. It's not mean-spirited about Star Trek or about the fans who love it. It celebrates all of that while also being very funny about it. And then, this is the part people forget until they rewatch it, it actually makes you care. There's a real emotional arc here. The ensemble cast is incredible. Tim Allen, Sigourney Weaver, Alan Rickman, Sam Rockwell, everybody's great. Rickman in particular is doing something special with a role that easily could have just been a joke. It's funny, it's smart, it has more heart than it has any right to, and it holds up completely. One of the most rewatchable movies on this entire list. Easily. Contact is a movie that I think gets overlooked in conversations about great science fiction, and I don't fully understand why. This came out in 1997, directed by Robert Zemeckis, adapted from Carl Sagan's novel, and it is one of the best hard sci-fi films Hollywood has ever produced. Jodie Foster plays a radio astronomer who has spent her entire career searching for signs of extraterrestrial intelligence. And when she finally finds something, a transmission from the star system Vega, the movie spends the rest of its runtime exploring what that discovery actually means. Not just scientifically, but politically, spiritually, personally. And that's where the film earns its place on this list, because it's not really a movie about aliens. It's a movie about the collision between faith and empirical evidence, and about how people and institutions respond when they encounter something they cannot immediately explain or control. The film is patient with those questions. It doesn't try to resolve the tension too neatly, and I respect that enormously. The lead performance is excellent, the visuals still hold up, and the final act, which I will absolutely not spoil, is genuinely moving in a way I didn't fully expect the first time I saw it. Contact is a smart, grounded, emotionally satisfying science fiction film, and more people should be talking about it.
189 days into your solo journey.
Spaceman is a 2024 film directed by Johan Renck, and it stars Adam Sandler in a performance that I think genuinely surprised a lot of people who gave it a chance, which unfortunately was not that many people when it came out. The film follows an astronaut named Jakob on a long solo mission to the outer edges of the galaxy. Months in, isolated and mentally fraying, he encounters a mysterious ancient creature living in the shadows of his spacecraft. And if that sounds like it's setting up a horror movie, it really isn't. What it's actually setting up is a deeply introspective drama about loneliness, regret, and the relationships we damage without fully realizing it until we're too far away to do anything about it.
You go where I go, and I go where you go, right, Spaceman?
These are your thoughts.
I'll be honest, Spaceman asks you to accept a pretty unusual premise, and the pace is deliberately slow. It is not going to work for everyone, but for the right viewer, the sincerity of it really lands. The visuals are beautiful, the score is haunting, and Sandler does something quiet and restrained here that's far removed from most of his work. This one flew almost completely under the radar when it came out. If you passed on it, it's worth a second look.
If there's anybody out there at all, could you please contact me at home? Somebody come.
The Quiet Earth is a 1985 New Zealand science fiction film that most people have never heard of. And that's genuinely a shame, because it is one of the more interesting and original sci-fi concepts I've come across. The film opens with a scientist waking up to find that every other human being on Earth has simply vanished. No explanation, no bodies, no disaster, just silence. And what the movie does with that setup is smarter than you'd expect. It doesn't immediately go dark or desperate. It lets the character experience the strange initial freedom of being alone on the planet. The almost euphoric sense of having no rules, no obligations, no one watching. And then it very slowly and methodically starts dismantling that. Because the thing is, human beings are not built for that kind of isolation, and watching this character unravel, anchored by a genuinely committed lead performance, is unsettling in a way that no monster or alien threat could replicate. The film gets psychological in ways that feel earned rather than imposed. And then there's the ending, which I will not describe at all, other than to say it is one of the boldest final images in science fiction cinema, and it will absolutely stick with you. This one is a quiet, strange, deeply underrated film. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this list so far, go ahead and hit like on the video. It genuinely helps other people find this channel, and that matters. And if you want recommendations like this on a regular basis, subscribe. I try to put out content like this consistently, and the more people who find it, the better. All right, back to the list.
This is Barbo Observatory. Are you receiving this?
Is anyone out there?
The Midnight Sky is one I actually recommended in a previous video, and I want to bring it up again here because I think it deserves more attention than it got. This came out in 2020, directed by and starring George Clooney, and it is a quiet, ambitious post-apocalyptic film that I think a lot of people either missed or wrote off too quickly. The film runs two parallel stories. On Earth, a terminally ill scientist is making his way across a frozen Arctic wasteland, trying to reach a communication antenna powerful enough to warn a returning crew of astronauts that they cannot come home. The planet is no longer habitable. In space, that crew is making their way back, unaware of what's waiting for them, and the film cuts between these two threads in a way that builds genuine tension, even though the pacing is deliberately unhurried throughout.
But while you're doing all that, your own life is just slipping away.
That's why I have to contact them.
What makes it work is the visual craft. The Arctic sequences are brutal and beautiful simultaneously. The space sequences have a clean, eerie quality to them that captures the isolation of deep space without being melodramatic about it. And Alexandre Desplat's score ties everything together in a way that amplifies the emotional weight without overselling it. It's not a fast movie, but if you give it the space it needs, pun not really intended, it's a genuinely moving watch.
What the hell is this?
Star Trek Beyond came out in 2016 as the third film in the rebooted Kelvin timeline, and I want to make the argument that it's the best one of the three.
The first two have their fans, and I understand why, but Beyond is the one that actually feels like a proper Star Trek adventure from start to finish. The setup is that the Enterprise gets ambushed in deep space, and the crew ends up stranded on a hostile alien planet split into small groups. And splitting the crew is a genuinely smart creative choice here, because it forces character pairings that wouldn't normally happen. The standout is Spock and Bones. Carl Urban and Zachary Quintel together are just fantastic. Their dynamic, the way they argue and push each other, is the best thing in the movie, possibly the best thing in the reboot trilogy.
Pardon me.
The film also introduces Jayla, played by Sofia Boutella, who is a terrific new addition. She's self-sufficient and funny and genuinely engaging to watch, and I'm still a little annoyed that more wasn't done with her character after this film. There's an action sequence in the third act involving a Beastie Boys song that is so enjoyably ridiculous that I've watched it multiple times just for the fun of it. Beyond is a joyful, well-crafted blockbuster that I think holds up better than its reputation suggests.
Elysium is a film I go back and forth on a little, but ultimately I always end up recommending it because the things it does well, it does very well. Neil Blomkamp directed this in 2013, and like he did with District 9, he wrapped a pretty pointed piece of social commentary inside a sci-fi action film that actually delivers on the action side of things. The premise is simple and effective. In the future, the wealthy live on a pristine orbital habitat called Elysium, with access to technology that can cure any disease. Everyone else lives on a ruined, overcrowded Earth with none of that. Matt Damon plays a factory worker who ends up in a race against time to get to Elysium, not for ideological reasons, at least not initially, just because his life depends on it. And the film is smart to keep the stakes personal before they become political. You're invested in the character before the movie starts asking bigger questions. The exosuit combat is inventive and genuinely intense. Sharptol Copley is playing a completely unhinged mercenary and is clearly having a great time doing it, which translates well on screen. The third act doesn't quite stick the landing the way the first 2/3 set up, and I think that's the honest knock on Elysium. But as a piece of visually striking, socially conscious sci-fi action, it absolutely delivers, more often than not.
Launch control, this is Houston. We are go for launch.
Apollo 13 is the kind of movie where you know exactly how it ends before you press play, because it's a true story, and one most people have at least a passing familiarity with, and Ron Howard still makes it almost unbearably tense. That's genuinely impressive filmmaking. This came out in 1995, and it chronicles a 1970 lunar mission that suffered a catastrophic system failure en route to the moon, forcing the crew and NASA's ground team to improvise a survival plan using the limited resources available. And the film is excellent at making you feel the weight of that problem in real time. It doesn't rely on a villain or a romantic subplot or any of the usual tools Hollywood reaches for. The tension comes entirely from watching brilliant people work against the clock. Tom Hanks, Kevin Bacon, Bill Paxton, the three astronauts are all excellent.
We're looking at less than 15 minutes of life support in the Odyssey. We never lost an American in space. We're sure as hell not going to lose one on my watch.
Ed Harris as the flight director on the ground might be the best performance in the film, and there's a sequence involving a CO2 filter and a bunch of random equipment laid out on a table that is one of the most quietly gripping scenes in any movie from this era. Nothing explodes, nobody raises their voice, it's just people thinking, and somehow that's more exciting than most action sequences. Apollo 13 is a masterclass in how to build tension without manufactured drama, and it holds up completely.
How far away is Jupiter?
Far.
Mommy said you're gonna be asleep for a long time. Are you gonna die?
And at the top of the list, I'm going with a movie that I think is genuinely one of the most underappreciated science fiction films ever made. 2010, The Year We Make Contact, from 1984. Now, I know what the reaction to that is going to be for some people. It's the sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is one of the greatest films ever made and also one of the most untouchable. Following that up is an almost impossible task, and what director Peter Hyams wisely chose to do is not try to replicate it. 2010 is a completely different kind of movie than 2001. It's grounded where 2001 is abstract. It's tense and propulsive where 2001 is hypnotic and meditative. And honestly, I think that's the right call.
Can't find him!
The story follows a joint American-Soviet expedition, set against the backdrop of real geopolitical tension, by the way, which gives it a layer of weight, sent to investigate the drifting remains of the Discovery spacecraft and figure out what happened to HAL 9000. Roy Scheider, Helen Mirren, and John Lithgow are all excellent. The practical effects still hold up, and the third act, the actual payoff of what the monolith has been building toward this whole time, is genuinely awe-inspiring in a way that earns that word. People sleep on this one because they're comparing it to a film that's almost incomparable to anything. Take it on its own terms, 2010 is a tense, intelligent, emotionally satisfying space thriller that deserves a much bigger audience than it has. Easily my top pick on this list. Alright, now if you want to keep going after this, and I think you do, my next video is 10 films almost nobody has seen that will completely mess with your head. Psychological traps, unsettling cult favorites, endings you won't see coming. Genuinely, I'd be surprised if you've seen more than 3 or 4 of them. Go watch it. I'll see you there.